Good morning, NBT Nation. Good morning. It is a random Sunday morning pop up live here from NBT Studios. So excited for today's topic 5 mistakes I've made as a corporate trainer so you don't have to. That's right. I'm going to unpack the times I've kicked it in the weeds, the times I've screwed it up, the times I've made blunders, and more importantly, the lessons learned. And my goal of sharing this is to help you avoid the mistakes so that you can become a certified no boring trainer that much easier, my friends. So, welcome everyone out there. So excited to unpack this here on a random pop up live. Going into next year, you're going to see a little bit more of a schedule of these lives, going to announce them ahead of time so you can plan to attend. Really wanted to build a library over the course of this year of NBT lives. And then next year, we're going to schedule these out. If you find corporate training, how to use corporate strategic learning to move a business forwards, how to use strategic learning to impact revenue, profit, talent retention, net promoter score, just the nuts and bolts of effective training, all of that stuff. If you find that interesting, subscribe to the channel, give me a thumbs up, all of that fun stuff. So let's dive in, my friends. 5 mistakes I've made over the years so you don't have to. It's a free service here at NBT Nation. All righty. Let us dive in, my friends, to the 5 mistakes I've made along the way. Now, I want to set the stage here. I'm not really going to talk that much about the mechanics of training. So, in other words, when I first started out training way back in the 90s, of course, it was a fire hose of information. I planned my sessions by opening up a PowerPoint and thinking about what I wanted to tell people, having a 700-page slide deck, um, asking compound questions, not explaining activities well. Those are all sort of the procedural mistakes of training. And I'm going to kind of touch on some of those along the way here. But what I'm talking about really are the big blunders, the mistakes I made, the things that I overlooked, the areas I didn't really pay attention to that affected learning strategically throughout the organizations I worked with or was working with at the time. The mistakes I made that really undermined the effectiveness of learning and impacting outcomes across the business. So we're talking those sorts of mistakes more so than just the procedural little mistakes. We'll do a separate video on that one next time. So without further ado, one of the biggest top 5 mistakes as a corporate trainer, networking. Oh man, really screwed that up early on in the early days. Really not building the connections with the right strategic partnerships across the organization. So easy to get really busy. And in some cases, it was a training department of one for 500 people. In some cases, working on projects that needed a larger team. In some cases, doing training is one of many job roles, not just being a full-time trainer. Whatever the scenario, really, really easy to get heads down, get really stuck in my silo. I've got to get this training done, so I'm just going to do this training, and not really building alliances across the organization, not really searching out those key stakeholders that could help me have better insights about the organization, give me a heads up on big picture initiatives that might be coming down the pike, not really spending time learning about what was important to this team over here because I was working on a training on this team. But what this team was doing over here directly impacted this team. So if I had taken the time to build that network, this training over here would have been far more rich, far more robust, far more effective. Really focus on building a network to drive towards business needs. That was definitely something early on. It was easy to be busy, to be siloed, to be really heads down and focused. I'm doing training and not thinking holistically across the organization. Another layer to this, avoiding irritating people. And that's something I still struggle with to this day. Those people who willfully refuse to pay any attention to anything that has to do with training. Those people who willfully and actively resist training. I have little patience for those individuals. Now don't hear that wrong. It's on me to explain to them the power of training to achieve a business outcome. It's on me to help them see the light. But at a certain point, I can only throw my pearls to pigs for so long. Unfortunately, though, in my early days, that time period before I just sort of gave up on people was far too short. Was instant frustration, instant irritation, instantly just sort of rejecting people. Well, they're never going to get it, so why bother? Now, again, don't hear me wrong. You got to set effective boundaries. You got to pick your battles. You got to find those strategic alliances where you can find them. Of course, all that is true. And if somebody is just willfully refusing to read your emails and come to your trainings and observe and come to sync meetings and agreeing to a sync meeting and then canceling, and okay, at a certain point, if you have 5 other people that will play ball and do wanna partner, well, why are you killing yourself with this individual? Go partner with those 5. But like I said, in my early days, I was far too quick to kinda cut people off that wanted to, fight, resist training. So don't make that mistake in BT Nation. So build networks with the right contacts and spend the time winning over, explaining excuse me, explaining to those people who don't want to get it. It's on you to earn their trust. It's on you to learn what's important to them. It's on you to learn what makes them tick. It's on you to learn what their pressures are and what other competing things they have going on. It's on you, trainers. Don't cut them off too early. Pushing process over outcomes. Big mistake number 2 that I made throughout my early days as a corporate trainer. And here's what I mean by that. Get an opportunity to do some training and somebody would say, "Hey, I want to think about doing some training." And I'd be so excited to get an opportunity. Oh my gosh, training. It's going to be Addy, Bloom's taxonomy. We got to set up this 97 step process to do this. And oh, yeah, we'll pull people offline for a 12-week workshop. And it was overwhelming to people for sure. Um, I didn't focus enough on what was important to that internal customer. And I was so busy trying to get them to understand the nuts and bolts and mechanics of training, and especially if what they were asking for conflicted with what good training was going to be. I wasn't savvy enough to just keep them focused on the outcome that they wanted and let me worry about the L&D wizardry in the background. I wasn't confident enough yet in my skills to just keep them really focused in on those outcomes. And as a byproduct of that, I would over explain. I would try to get them to understand why the way, I wanted to do this topic, then this topic, then this topic. And I spent way too much time on all that stuff. And they don't care. They don't care. Their job is not to understand adult learning science. Their job is to achieve an outcome for the business. That's their job. And it's my job to help them achieve that outcome through the vehicle of training. My job is not to teach them what good training looks like. Now, if you're smooth and you get a little bit of confidence and a little bit of skill, you can help them get their outcomes. And along the way, they teach them what training is all about. But when they approach you for a training request and you instantly dive into this overwhelming fire hose of, let me show you the way of all things learning, you're not going to get the results that you want from that. And I didn't. It took some time to kind of figure that out. The other mistake that I made was, and what I have on the screen here is this idea of results over purity. Think back as a trainer. You're in a meeting. A manager has said, "Hey, I would like you to put together a training." And what they're asking for is ridiculous. They want too much covered in too little time. They don't have enough time for planning. They don't want to spend the time on a proper analysis. They maybe want to start suggesting activities, and you're like, brother, I don't even have a design in place. Why are we even talking about activities for point number 7? All that kind of stuff, right? One of the mistakes I made early on was focusing on battling for purity of what a good session looks like instead of just focusing in on getting the results and picking and choosing which one of those battles I wanted to fight. Now it's easy to just go when they say, well, I think we need to do this crazy activity for point number 5, to just politely hear them out. And maybe it's a good idea, maybe it's not, whatever, but that's not the time to to have that battle and go into some sort of confrontation over what good training looks like. That's the time to really keep coming back to results. That's the time to really keep getting them thinking about the outcome that they're trying to achieve and what the roadblocks are and what the data is showing them and all of these things. And there's a time and a place where you do have to push back. Again, if they want to cover 7,000 topics in a 1-hour session, at some point you are going to have to produce a design that maybe covers 2 or 3 topics, and then you go back to them and say, "Hey, listen, here's the reality of the situation. We can't put in the other 600,000 topics because it's just not gonna work. Those topics are too complicated. They need time to practice, blah, blah, blah." So, don't get so stuck on the purity piece. Get stuck on the results piece, and it took me a while to figure that out, and I irritated a lot of people along the way, whether it was I was over explaining learning science they didn't care about, whether I was going to battle over things that were just as easily kind of handled at other times. I mean, once you give the stakeholder back a great design, here's the roadmap of what we're going to cover, here's the agenda, here are the topics, and they're going to go in this order. Then all of a sudden they go, oh, yeah, that's great. And all of a sudden, those other 6,000 things tend to fall by the wayside. But it took me a while to learn that. I wanted to get that all hashed out right in the beginning. And you don't have to do that. So learn on how to navigate through those things. So there's 2 of the 5 mistakes I've made as a corporate trainer so that you don't have to. Ready for number 3? Third biggest mistake: talent, and I'm using that advisedly, over process. Too many times I skipped good training process thinking I'll fix it later. And mostly I'll fix it in the delivery. They want me to cover 6,000 things in a 1-hour session. No problem. I'll just try to do all that in real time. I'll do it live and I'll fix it in the delivery. They need a training design put together. Uh, and instead of really carving out the time that I need, I just sort of slap some bullet points together and send it back to him. Not really work on it effectively or as deeply as it should. Definitely skimping on analysis, really rushing. Sometimes even again, kind of my insecurity early on, years and years ago, in my insecurity to show them, look what I could do, look what I could do. I'd start producing prototype content before the analysis piece was really even completed. Yeah, that was a mistake. And then you'd get down the field and complete your analysis and realize all that content you built was useless now. And so you wasted all that time. And of course, once you start putting out content, well, why are you doing it this way? Why are you doing it that way? I don't like that font. I don't like that color. Now you're talking about content. You haven't even done the analysis properly yet. Now, don't don't get me wrong, over time, I learned how to do analysis and sketch out a design kind of concurrently, or at least overlap to speed the process up. I learned at different organizations that I worked with the depth of analysis that organization needed, or the baseline questions to ask at that organization. And that sped things up. So I'm not suggesting you have to drag this out, but I definitely skimped on analysis in favor of, well, I'll figure it out later. I'll figure it out later. I'll figure out later. So over time, I realized that. I realized how to ask the right questions of the right stakeholders and kind of develop a shorthand with those stakeholders, working repeatedly with stakeholders to be able to um, kind of understand what their needs were, those sorts of things. I tell you another way that this was a mistake, and it cost me in early on as a trainer, is if there was a process or a procedure involved in the training, but it wasn't locked in. It wasn't doctrinal. The organization hadn't come to a conclusion that that was the right process. Too often, I would try to again fix it in the delivery. We'll just figure it out in the delivery. And that's why I say talent. Pretty good at managing a classroom, but you can't, no matter how good you are at managing a classroom or managing a session, no matter how good you are at that, if your process is not figured out, how in the heck can you teach it? If your process is broken, you can't teach a good one. If the process isn't written down, if it isn't vetted, if it isn't agreed to across the organization, how on earth can you teach it? But somehow I thought, well, I'll fix it. I'll fix it in the mix. I'll fix it by doing it live. I'm such a great trainer. I can make it happen. I didn't. It didn't work. Don't do that. So thinking that you have the skills to pay the bills and gloss over some of these processes of designing and developing and getting ready to do a training, whatever process you use. I'm a big Addy guy, but whatever process you use to get there, doesn't matter. But stay focused on that process and be, know where you can speed things up, know where you can overlap things, know how you can um, get through those steps a little quicker, how you can automate them, how you can standardize them, all that for sure. But don't skip over them completely thinking you'll fix it later, because you can't and you won't. And you waste a lot of time and frustrate a lot of people and you'll be embarrassed, kind of like I was. So don't do that. All right. Mistake number 4. These are the mistakes I've made as a corporate trainer, so you don't have to. These are big picture mistakes that undermine the effectiveness of strategic learning across the organization. Not so much the mechanics of delivery, although I make plenty of those mistakes too. Um, these are the big picture mistakes I've made and learned from, so that hopefully NBT Nation can learn from them as well. Stakeholder wants over business needs. Boy, did I make that mistake too many times. Stakeholder would approach me, hey, we need a training. It's a training for my team. Cool. And I would get very focused in on the needs of the team, the needs of that stakeholder. And then very quickly, that training would become disconnected from the overarching needs of the business and the overarching strategy of the business, the overarching language of the business. And it would become this very myopic team centric thing, sometimes even creating new concepts, new ideas, new languages inside that team that either maybe aligned or misaligned with the needs and language and vibe of the company, maybe sometimes even conflicted a little bit. So it took me some time to figure out that even when the stakeholder can't or won't think big picture, I needed to. Even when the stakeholder can't or won't think across the organization and how the different teams all fit together and how the different processes fit together. If they couldn't or wouldn't do that, it was on me to go figure that out so that that team specific training could be super powerful, super rich, super robust. That's my job as a trainer to think that way. I serve the organization, not the team. Even if you're a trainer attached to the team, even if you're a trainer attached to a team, you always got to think about the needs of the organization and the business while you're doing that team specific training and not lose sight of the language, the ethos, the core values, the overarching strategy, the language, the buzzwords, all that kind of stuff. Can't lose sight of them. And I sure did early on. Good news is I figured it out over time. The other piece is connecting learning in a business setting to the overarching needs of the business is not complicated. And really, it boils down to what you see on the screen: revenue, retention, revenue, profit, net promoter score. How can you affect those four buckets? And I guarantee you, as a trainer, if you talk that language, think about those problems, think about those opportunities, look to connect your training, no matter how basic and simple and easy of a training it is. Connect your training to those big picture goals and needs of the organization and keep that connection simple. Not only will your trainings be better and your trainees will be by osmosis doing things that affect those four key buckets, but when you report out on your training, when your stakeholders start talking about your training, when you get time with the C-suite and the executives, everything is couched in the terms of how do we move the dial on those four big areas. And I'm pretty sure there's not too many executive types out there across this great big planet that don't care about one, if not all, of those four buckets at any given time. There's not too many business leaders, the C-suite types, who aren't thinking about laying awake at night, anxious, worried about those four things. So if you, as the lowly corporate trainer way down the food chain somewhere, can be producing trainings that have a direct and clear tie to those four buckets, I guarantee you over time, now it may take a hot minute, but over time, that will bubble up through the organization. You'll get noticed. You will get traction. You will get the attention of those C-suite folks. So keep it simple: retention, revenue, profit, net promoter score. Stay focused in on those things and you will get much better success. Now, you still might be doing a team specific training on this very basic, simple thing. And that's fine. That's great. We all have to do that as trainers. I still do it today with all the different organizations I work with. You oftentimes, most of the time, are spending your time on a very team specific topic or a team specific thing. But think big picture. Always, always think big picture. And it took me a while to kind of figure that out and put those pieces together. All right, NBT Nation, we're down to the last one. And this one may surprise you. This one, NBT Nation, may surprise you that I made this mistake as a corporate trainer early on, forgetting the user. Forgetting the user. And again, I'm not talking about like the day-to-day mechanics of delivering a session, although I've forgotten the user doing that too. But there's two key areas I really want to spend a little time on. One is the content avalanche. And what I mean by that is I can create content like nobody's business. You give me a thing, a topic, and I'm going to have you an infographic, a video, uh, talking points, a PDF, fillable PDF, an infographic, whatever. I'm going to have all that to put together for you pretty darn quick. It doesn't take much time to crank that stuff out. And don't get me wrong, sometimes you need to be in that mode when you're building inside. Maybe you're in a small to medium sized firm and there's no training whatsoever. Sometimes you got to crank out a lot of content to get the thing going. Totally get that. But the mistake I made in my early days was that I focused exclusively on creating the content, but I wasn't thinking long term in how does all that content fit together into a specific program? How does all that content fit together into some sort of learning pathway? So while it may look like I'm just spewing out all of these videos and infographics, guides and cheat sheets and podcast and explainer videos and all this stuff, they're all kind of filling in the blanks of what will become a course a week or a month or a year later. That's where I needed to be. And it took me a while to get there. Early on, it was just let me just crank out all this stuff. And it's real easy to get in that mode because, frankly, I think as corporate trainers, we love doing that stuff. That's the fun part. That's the interesting part. That's the exciting part. We get to put our creative hats on. It's really, really enjoyable stuff, right? But it's if you go too long and stay in that mode too long, you will just vomit content all over the place and nobody will really, well, where do I start? I've had users say that to me before. Um, I was working with an organization and created some SharePoint pages for them. Okay, great, awesome. But it was just this overload of information. Well, where do I even start? And you got to think about the user. And sometimes, and I don't mean this the way it sounds, you got to dumb it down for them. You got to make it simple. You got to make it easier for them. If you're a new X, click here. If you've been in the job for 5 years, click here. If you want to learn about X, click here. And then you have this course, or maybe it's e-learning. You're building out e-learning courses instead of just having this avalanche of courses. Maybe have a course catalog. And here's, for onboarding, start here. For job skills training, start here. For ongoing development, start here. Whatever. So think about the user and think about how the users use. Oh my gosh, did I make that mistake a lot of times over the years? Think about how the users use your training. Now, in the early days, a lot of times the training I did way back when was classroom based, or it was part of an organizational meeting, a sales meeting, something like that. And that's fine. But think about how your users use as you kind of graduate outside that universe. One time I I built a video library, kind of forgetting that my audience spent most of their time in cars, in automobiles, traveling to get to their customer sites. It's kind of hard to watch a video while you're driving. So naturally, the only time they could watch it was when they were in their office, which was a very narrow period of time throughout the week. Well, I didn't think about that. So next thing you know, well, why isn't anybody using our video library? Well, because we spend 90% of our time driving. Oh, maybe I should make some podcasts that are easily audio accessible. As a quick example, uh, do our users, excuse me, are our users out on the production floor? Well, they may not even have access to their computers. So how are you going to get them knowledge? Maybe your users are out in a remote wilderness site. They're firefighters or forest rangers, or maybe they're on an oil rig somewhere and they're dirty and nasty and they can't have a ThinkPad while they're out on deck doing the oil. So how are you going to get their learning to them? You got to think about how are the users going to use. Now, in corporate training environments, a lot of times it is classroom based, and that makes it kind of nice and kind of easy. But there's a gazillion other ways to share learning across the organization. We talk here at MBT Nation all the time about a layered learning approach. How are those layers? How are your users interacting with those layers? So lots to unpack there, but forgetting the user, that is definitely a mistake I made early on. I was just so focused on let me crank out content. I didn't really think about how anybody would interact with it. Oopsie doops. So there you have it, MBT Nation. 5 big picture mistakes I've made as a corporate trainer and how it's impacted uh, the strategic learning. More importantly, lessons learned, things I've done about it, grown over the years. Hopefully, you've been able to kind of take these bits and pieces and think through the mistakes that maybe you're making, or maybe help you avoid some of those mistakes. And that's the whole ethos behind no boring training, is helping trainers to avoid those mistakes, big and small. Now, through the course of this live, I've been talking about how the choices we make and the mistakes we make as trainers impact strategic learning. There's a lot of delivery mistakes that you can make too. Not properly explaining your exercise, asking compound questions, relying on one delivery technique too much, all of these sorts of things. But whether you're a trainer or whether you're a C suite leader of a firm or leader of a business, strategic learning in the hands of a certified no boring trainer using no boring training concepts can move your business forwards. It can impact talent retention. It can impact revenue. It can impact profits. It can impact net promoter scores. When you do it in the framework of strategic learning and you put it in the hands of a certified no boring trainer. And that's what no boring training is all about, is helping both of those parties. If you're a trainer, this information is helpful to you. If you're trying to move your business forwards as a leader, you can think back to, well, where is my group going wrong? Are my stakeholders bringing trainers into the discussion? Maybe I should go ask my stakeholders. Are our stakeholders giving the training group proper time to follow processes? Again, it's something you can impact as a leader. As a leader, you can go to your trainers. What is your process to plan a training? Help me to understand it. Including your trainers in, hey, here's the big picture strategy of the organization. Here's a strategy vision session. I want to bring you in, trainers. So whether you're a trainer or a leader, it doesn't matter. No boring training lives to help you both. And just want to remind everybody, new ebook coming out soon, Hard Truths of Becoming a Certified No Boring Trainer, dropping very soon. Been working really hard on this. I think it's going to really help corporate trainers to understand some of these bigger picture mistakes that can be made. So there you have it, NBT Nation. Top 5 mistakes I've made as a corporate trainer so you don't have to. Big picture mistakes that undermine the strategic learning foundation inside an organization. Which one of these has been most interesting to you? Which one of these shocked you the most? Which one of these do you want to learn more about? Let me know. Leave me some comments down below. Give me some feedback, even if you're watching this on the replay. Leave some comments. Let's get some discussion going. But there you have it, NBT Nation. 5 mistakes that I've made so you don't have to. Keep learning. Keep diving in. Keep building out those strategic learning programs. Keep moving every day just to improve that training a little bit more every day, and you're going to see big results over time. There you have it, NBT Nation. Thanks for joining me on a pop-up live. Like I said at the beginning, if you like this content, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and going into 2026, you're going to start to see more scheduled lives. So you get a little bit of advance notice. Now that we have a library of NBT live topics, next year, we're going to announce schedule ahead of time. Really excited about that. Thanks, NBT Nation, for joining me. Hope you all have a great rest of your weekend.